Attention listeners, AfterSight's annual hike is coming up on July 27th.
It was a really good experience for me.
Visit aftersight.org/hike and become an audio trekker today.
That hike today gave me so much courage.
You're listening to an AINC original podcast. We believe you don't have to do life without a compass. Let us be your guide on this amazing journey. Welcome to Navigating Life with Vision Loss.
Hello, I'm Kim Wardlow. I am your host for NLVL. We are here in the month of May, and we are talking about mental health this month and various aspects of that. Last week, we talked to Beth Gustin about loneliness and some strategies to overcome loneliness. And in that conversation, we also talked about how loneliness and depression sometimes can interact, or folks are trying to figure out, are they depressed? Or are they just lonely? So this week we have Charlie Kramer with us. He has been with us before. So welcome, Charlie. It's great to have you back. I know you were here talking about relationships. I know you've been Blind Chick and Blind Sight as well, talking about both mental health and relationship topics. So obviously, you're one of our guests that we just love to have on and provide us with such great information. So Charlie's a life coach. He has lost vision. He was legally blind since 15. And Charlie, I don't know if there's anything else you want to just tell folks about your background and the work you do before we actually dive into our topic.
Sure. Yeah. And thanks for having me and showering me with compliments. That's very nice of you. I'm very grateful to be on the show, and always nice connecting with you all. So I work as a life coach for people with disabilities, and that is the wide spectrum of disabilities. So not just people with vision loss, but any type of disability. We've worked with them before. And really a lot of what we focus on is how to live an empowered, confident life with your disability, not despite your disability. So it's really looking at trying to make yourself whole, connected with the disability. And a lot of that comes with acceptance and boundaries, and mental health is definitely very intertwined in it. And yeah, I have retinitis pigmentosa myself, and it's something that runs in my family. I'm very confident and comfortable with my blindness now, and even love being blind, but it hasn't always been that way. So I've been on this journey that we're going to talk about today myself too. So definitely can relate on that front as well.
Great. Well, let's dive in. First, trying to understand depression. What is it? Is there an actual definition of depression versus, we all have a bad day or feel down or something, but actually the definition of depression and the various manifestations, how it might appear in a person's life?
Sure. So I don't have a working definition off the top of my head, so I'm not going to try and create one and give you the wrong one. I think the biggest thing is that if you're questioning or confused about whether or not you're dealing with depression or just having a rough period, my first recommendation would just be to talk to a professional, because one of the easiest things is to make life more difficult by trying to figure everything out on our own. And sometimes the easiest thing you can do is just ask for help. So that's number one, because someone else is going to be able to help you to understand what the differences might be between depression and just having a hard few days. So the way that I like to look at it, though, is that depression is a disability. It means that you don't have the ability to regulate your emotions at the same level as someone maybe without this mental health disability. So it's a really important way to think about it, because if you feel like you can't control the depressive episodes, maybe they come out of nowhere. It's not that something's happened or something that's popped up that's causing you to feel sad, but maybe it might come out of nowhere and more often, and you really struggle to snap out of those moments. That could be a sign that it's a disability and not just having a bad few days. And I will also say that everyone has depressive episodes. I tend to clarify that it depends on how your neurons work to be able to actually help you snap out of those moments that might classify you as having depression or any other type of mental health diagnosis, rather than going through something which everyone goes through, which is just a period of sadness or loneliness or depression itself.
Right. What about myths surrounding depression? I think sometimes maybe a person would benefit from contacting a professional, but they think, I don't want that label. I'm probably just having a few bad days and I'll be okay. What are some myths and misconceptions about depression?
I think the biggest thing is we have to keep thinking about it versus the clinical diagnosis versus having, depressive moments or having moments where you're feeling depressed. Because for someone that actually has diagnosed depression, I think the biggest misconception is that they can just go for a walk in the park and snap out of it. And it's really important to remember that that's not the case. So it's similar for someone to come up to me and say, Charlie, why don't you just start seeing better? Right? Like, I don't have the ability to do that. Right. And that's similar for people with depression. Now, there's different ways to navigate through it and to make our lives more manageable with the disability, but it doesn't mean that my eyesight is necessarily going to come back. So some of the ways that I cope are by using my cane or for asking for support or assistive technology, in the same way that someone with depression might be using therapy or medication or a whole host of other techniques and resources. So that's really important. And I think a huge misconception that, you can just talk to a friend, or you can hang out more often, or why don't you exercise more and then depression will be completely gone. It might improve the depression. It might improve the symptoms. However, you are diagnosed with depression, and that will always be there in your life. Just like I might be able to improve the way I navigate with blindness, but I'm not going to be able to just get it to go away. And I think that's really, really important. Because a lot of people don't have that understanding. They tend to clump mental health diagnoses with, I'm just having a bad day.
Right.
And those are different things.
And how would you recommend a person say, I have been diagnosed with depression. I have my friends and my loved ones saying, some of the things you mentioned, just do this or just do that. You just need to snap out of it. Yeah. And I know that's not possible because I've been getting therapy or I've been getting treatment, and similar in the same way that individuals often get frustrated with people giving them advice about their vision loss or blindness. And it gets old having to educate folks. I can see that same thing happening of like, well, that's just not how it's going to work. And if you're already struggling with depression, and then people tell you just to cheer up, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think it's hard because, the first thing I like to try and teach our clients is that you want to recognize that the intentions of the person saying that are good. It doesn't make it easy to listen to. It doesn't make it feel any better, but it does give perspective. And I think one of the easiest things to do is to respond with frustration or anger. And although those are completely normal emotions to have, it may not be the way that we want to represent ourselves when talking about it. So that's one aspect of it that I think is really important. And then the other thing is you have to decide, is this person that is offering these suggestions to me someone that I want to understand what I'm going through, or do I want them to respect what I'm going through? And there's a difference between those two things, because no one will ever fully understand what you go through in your own body. Just like no one will ever understand how much vision I have or how much vision I don't, no matter how many times I draw a circle on my phone and say, this is how much I can see versus how much I can't. They'll never be able to fully imagine that, right? But I can try and give them more of an understanding. So I'll do that for people like my fiance or my best friends or my family, because I want those people in my inner circle to have that understanding. And sometimes I just need people to respect it, but I don't necessarily want to share every detail.
Right.
And that is something that I think is really powerful and really important, because nobody needs to understand. They just need to be respectful. And coming up with different lines and phrases to respond to when those typical suggestions come up can be really helpful to make sure that people respect it. So you could say something like, thanks so much for the suggestion. I actually can't control how, I can't control at the same level my emotional state. And right now I'm not really open to talking about it more, but I appreciate you, wanting me to improve. And then if they say it again, well, I was thinking this, be like, I'm really not open to talking to it more, but I wanted to hear, did you watch the NBA playoffs? Like, you can just change the subject, right? So you've already said, I'm not going to talk about it more. Thanks for your good intentions. And then let's move on and talk about something else. Whereas I may go in the different direction if it's your partner or your family member and say, I know that you're saying this because you really want to help. And if you're open to it, I'd like to tell you a little bit more of how sometimes that can almost be hard for me to hear because I can't control it. Like, would you have a few minutes to talk about that? Because then it opens up a different line of understanding and communication. And you just need to be clear on what relationships and you want to have those types of conversations with.
Right. It's an investment to do that.
It is.
Yeah.
An emotional investment,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
Which is important when you're talking about mental health. You got to make sure what your emotional battery can withhold.
Right. So choose carefully who you want to really let into that inner circle.
Mm-hmm.
There is science behind this. So what are contributing factors to depression? Maybe biological, psychological, environmental, things that can be triggers or contribute to a person's level of depression?
I mean, pretty much everything that you just said. Some of it is definitely biological. What your family history is has a big impact on it. Also, not just your family history biologically, but your family history emotionally, how you were raised, the relationships that you had growing up. And it also can be impacted and triggered by different life events that occur later in life too. And for many people listening to this show, that might be getting a diagnosis of vision loss. And all of those different factors and even more, right? Like where you live might impact it, who you surround yourself with. There's a ton of different things there. However, again, I'd go back to saying that there's a difference between a depressive episode or loneliness or being sad, which all those things can contribute to as well, and having a diagnosis of depression, meaning that even though these contributing factors are impacting your mental health, there's a disability there that's also at play, and the importance of making space for that and giving yourself grace and understanding in that as well.
Is it something that you just can inherit? Is it just genetically,
Yeah.
My mother had depression. Her father had depression. So then I'm more at risk for depression. Should I be doing something proactively, preemptively, or is there just no way to know if that's something that you'll experience if that it does tend to run in your family?
I would say yes to a lot of the above. Different mental health diagnoses run in my family, just like blindness might. And I think the challenging bit is that it might show up and activate at different points in your life, just like blindness might, right? So for my family, genetically, at 5 years old or around there is when almost everyone in the family got diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. And for other people that might have recessive genes with these different disabilities, it might show up when you're 30 or 50 or 25. You have no idea of knowing. So I think the biggest thing that you can do is, regardless of having a specific diagnosis or whether or not you're preparing for the potential of having a diagnosis because it runs in your family, is building healthy habits and tools that you can use to help navigate through those challenging periods. Because regardless of you having a diagnosis, one thing that life can guarantee is challenge and pain, and then change. And you want to prepare yourself for those moments. And that could mean therapy. It could mean working with a coach. It could mean making sure that you have a support group that you speak with, but having an open dialogue and being aware of your own mental health and taking responsibility for it is going to help you no matter what.
Could we talk a little bit about some of the coping mechanisms? So a person who has been diagnosed with depression, what strategies can help continue through life? Yes, maybe a person is seeing a therapist, they're getting treatment, but they're still having to navigate and live with the impacts of the depression on a day-to-day.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll share my philosophy of how we work with people on a mental health capacity, especially with disabilities, whether that is a mental health disability or just someone who has a disability that's dealing with the challenges that come with diagnosis and navigating a life with that disability. I tend to teach tools that you can use in the moment to help navigate through those situations, to not necessarily learn how to avoid having pain show up, but to learn how to deal with it when it does. And that looks different for different people, right? So a few things that I find are really helpful is, number one, learning how to live more mindfully. And that means being aware of the present moment without judging yourself for it. One of the easiest things to do is to beat ourselves up for how we feel. So if you can create a practice every day, 2 minutes of noticing what's around you, noticing how you feel without judging yourself for it and being more of a curious observer, that can really help you when you're having a depressive episode and you can say, wow, I'm noticing right now that I'm having a depressive episode. And instead of going, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you doing better? You need to get over this. You just go, okay, I'm really glad I'm aware of that. Good job for noticing, right? So that's one way of doing things. And that's the first step, right? Noticing it. Another thing that we like to teach is making sure that you're processing through emotions at a time where it's healthy for you to do so. So a lot of times people will just talk just to talk. And there's this voice constantly going in their head of how to solve the problem and what to do about it. And sometimes all that's doing is amplifying the pain and amplifying what's going on. So there might be moments where you need to just distract yourself. You might need to play some video games, watch some Netflix, go out with some friends, do anything to actually avoid the emotion for a little bit, and then set a time in your calendar to recheck with yourself. How am I feeling about this? And if you're at a more neutral state, then talk to someone about it, then work through it, right? And that's actually what therapy is. You don't have therapy 24/7. You have it once a week for an hour. It's the set time that it's in your schedule to go, I'm going to talk about my feelings, and you're prepared for it. It's rare that you go into therapy 2 minutes after something triggers you, right? You have time to come down, to distract yourself, and then to go into it. So that's another really big skill. And then just different breathing techniques can be really helpful to ground yourself and calm yourself for a moment. And then depending on the person, physical activity can be a huge one. And what we eat can be a huge thing as well, that are just preventative over time. I noticed that the more I eat hamburgers and sit on the couch, the more frustrated I get, so it doesn't mean you have to, only drink green juice and, constantly be on the treadmill, but just find some balance in your life and little things. So for me, every single morning, I go on an hour-long walk with my dog, and that's just in our routine, and it helps me, right? It doesn't cure anything, but it does support me. And having those routines built in is really helpful as well.
Yeah. And just having a way to process those feelings so that we're not either just feeling so overwhelmed by so many feelings or just tucking them all away and just not dealing with them at all. And because then eventually they will find a way out, even if you don't.
They will, them. And sometimes it's not always pretty,
That's right.
So you got to. And I will say that there's different people have different personality types. So, I've worked with people in our programs that come in and they say everything's fine, I'm great, everything's great. I'm like, well, then why are you here? What are you doing in this program? And what's really underneath the surface of the I'm fine, I'm just going to get over it. So there's that type of person who buries everything. But then there's also the type of person who just can't stop talking about the problems, whether it's in their head or out loud. And for me, mental health is about learning to find the balance and building the tools to work through those challenging moments, not necessarily to always be ready to talk about it or never feel them at all. And I think that's also a misconception that is important to debunk.
How can we break the stigma of mental health? I think it's certainly improved. My mother did have depression, clinical depression, and in the 70s, that it just wasn't that long time ago, but it wasn't really talked about. So I think so much progress has been made, but there's still some stigma around it. It can still be awkward to have conversations around mental health. Again, depending who you're talking to, it can be easy with some folks and difficult with others. But are there ways that just generally we can all work to reduce the stigma around mental health?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is happening, and the biggest thing for me is just being willing to share that you are in therapy yourself. So I often share this with my clients all the time. I don't want the picture in their heads that I'm always happy and everything's perfect, because I do experience moments that are painful. The difference is that I've built up a toolkit and resources and the mental resilience to be able to process through and work through those experiences so that I don't let them dictate my actions, right? That's the key difference. So, but the way that I got there was by working hard to build the resources and to build the tools and to practice them. And I think it's important to say that. And then to say, we're not always perfect and everyone needs a support system. So I normalize that as much as I possibly can with my clients, but also with my friends. They're like, what'd you do today? I'm like, oh, I had therapy and then I went to this and I did that. They're like, how was therapy? I was like, dope. I love my therapist. That type of ease is what we need. And I caught up with a friend of mine from college the other day and he's like, yeah, I was working with my therapist the other day and we're doing this. And I was like, wow, that's so sick. He's like, yeah, I know, it was awesome. So having that type of open dialogue and even cheering for each other for what we're accomplishing in therapy or with a coach or in any of those different scenarios is really important. It's not, in my opinion, enough to just say, I'm going. It's the next step is to talk about how is it helping you? Why are you excited about it? To make it a positive experience.
And are there signs or flags of when you should consider seeking professional help, where you can kind of do some evaluation of yourself and say, wow, I really think I would benefit, or I think I might benefit. So I want to at least check that out and get a professional opinion.
Absolutely. The answer is actually, for me, really simple. If you are a human being, I recommend therapy. Okay. If you have feelings at all, you would benefit from working with a therapist, a coach, or any type of support that will allow you to work through your emotions outside of yourself. Mm-hmm. And for some people, that's going to yoga, right? And creating a community there. And for other people, talking about it's really helpful. So yes, there's definitely signs, but my advice is to not wait for the signs, right? Mm-hmm. Don't necessarily say, well, I don't need therapy because I'm not doing X, Y, and Z, which is why I'm almost like not sharing a list of things, right? Because I don't want anyone who's listening to this to go, well, I don't check any of those boxes, so I'm doing fine, right? You're probably doing fine, but what if you could be doing great? Isn't that enticing? There's always room for improvement. There's always something to work towards, and it doesn't need to be a moment of rock bottom for you to choose to improve and better yourself. So that would be my advice. Obviously, I'm very biased because I work in the mental health space and use therapy every single week myself, and I can't recommend it enough, truly.
We've talked a lot about, managing depression, different treatments, whether it's yoga, therapy, medication, of course, maybe an option as well. Can depression be overcome, or is it something that once you've been diagnosed with depression that you'll just have to manage for the rest of your life?
Yeah, I think the challenging bit is looking at it as something that you have to manage, right? For me, I don't look at my blindness as something I manage. I look at it as something I live with. It is a part of me. And the years in my life where I wasn't owning that aspect of me, I was missing out on the fullness of who I am. And in order to really experience full joy in life, we need to embrace everything about ourselves and to really take a look in the mirror and own all aspects. And I think the more that we do that, the more that we can learn that our disabilities, yes, are challenging and are something that we need to support and work with. And they're also something that add to us as human beings. So my answer would be to make sure that you don't look at it as something that you need to overcome, because that automatically places the depression or the mental health as something evil that you need to erase from your life. But you're erasing a part of yourself. So instead of erase, try to embrace and work with it and integrate it. And while working with that, you'll learn so much about yourself. And although life will be challenging at different moments, it'll be more joyful.
I think that's such great advice. And it's something I have not heard before myself, of actually integrating it in and not trying to minimize it in some way, shape, or form. So Charlie, how can a friend or family member be supportive in a healthy way? We've talked about some questions you might be asked. It's well-intended, but not helpful. But to be intentional and trying to be helpful, what would be a good support to give to someone?
Definitely. Yeah. I think for me, the biggest thing is to be willing to listen and to shut up. Because I think one of the biggest things that family members struggle with is they see and feel and hear the problems. And the first reaction is, how can I fix that for my family member? And that fixing can be overwhelming, and it might not be what your family member wants or what they need, but they do need someone to listen. So if you're willing to listen and then ask them this question, are you wanting me to just be here and support you right now and to listen, or are you open to any advice or support? And listen to what they say. If they say that they want additional support, give it to them, but go slowly. Don't okay, so here's what we're going to do. I've laid out a whole plan and we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Just pause, right? They still need to decide if that's something that they want to do. Ask them questions. Are you thinking you'd be open to, going to therapy? Do you want to meet up once a week and go get some lunch and just, chat? Whatever that person might find is helpful, just get them on that path where they feel like they've got that support. Can I send you a text every day to check in and just say, hey, whatever it may be, but to go slowly and allow the person who is dealing with the depression to be able to guide how they want it. Now, I will say that if you know of someone who is suicidal or having suicidal thoughts in any way, that's a different story. And you definitely want to make sure that you intervene and support that person as much as possible. But until you know it's that deep, just be there, listen, and let them go at their own pace while you're there to support them.
Well, Charlie, thank you for providing all of this information. I don't know if there are specific resources, but certainly I want to be sure that you share how folks can find you if they're interested in learning more about the work that you're doing.
Sure. And thank you guys again so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And for everyone who's listening too. You can follow me on social media platforms if you just want to stay connected that way, which is just Charlie Kramer Vision. So my name, Charlie Kramer and Vision. Or if you want to get in touch and learn about different programs that we offer, different coaching programs, or if you just want to have a conversation, you can book an intro call with me, which is just at www.charliekramervision.com. You'll find all the information there. And no matter what, we just want to get you the right support for you. So I do hope that you reach out and, look forward to meeting all of you and connecting with you.
Well, thank you again, Charlie. We may see you again in future episodes, but I appreciate you being with us for this really important topic today. Thanks to everybody for listening as well. If you have feedback for us, you can contact us via email at feedback@aftersight.org or by phone at 720-712-8856. I'll just quickly mention that our Audio Trekker Hike is coming up July 27th, and you can find all that information on our website, as well as registering. We do provide sighted guides if you would like to come and don't have a guide that you would already be bringing with you. We can provide one for you. And our website is just aftersight, AFTERSIGHT.org. If you're enjoying this podcast or any of our podcasts, we also would invite you to donate on our website and help us to keep this as a free resource for everybody. We appreciate that as well as your comments. So we hope today's information from Charlie Kramer has helped you to navigate your life with vision loss.